Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com, a proud affiliate of the Hockey News. I'm your host, Nick Brlansky, joined as always by Nick Horwat, and the month of November is almost to its end. 1 day left, 1 game left for the Pittsburgh Penguins, and with that, we will look ahead later in this show to a December preview for what the Pittsburgh Penguins can expect in the final month of 2023. But before we get to that, the bottom six seems like it's kind of fading into the background as of now. Some players have found their role. They're playing well. Others have kind of taken a step back and continue to regress. So what can the Penguins do? Who do the Penguins need to revitalize that bottom six and maybe solidify it, especially now that Drew O'Connor is up on the second line? Speaking of Drew O'Connor in the second line, Evgeni Malkin is not having the best of times for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Despite scoring a goal in his last game, he has cooled off considerably from his hot start when he was joking about, hey, if the season ended today, maybe I'd win the Hart Trophy. Those days are well in the past, and I think Evgeni Malkin has cooled off pretty considerably, and that's where we're going to start today. Horwat, before we get into that, Pens lose to the Nashville Predators. I'll let you say your piece because I don't think you've had the opportunity. Was that interference on Ryan O'Reilly in overtime?
Haven't had my opportunity to write multiple stories that it was a blatantly missed interference. The only issue is that the more you look at it, the first time I saw it, I thought it was Ryan O'Reilly dragging Erik Karlsson out of the play all the way around. It was Erik Karlsson kind of holding the stick of Ryan O'Reilly. So you have to call something there. I mean, if you're calling the Karlsson one, no harm, no foul. They win in 14 seconds. But at the same time, looking at it at full speed and even in slow motion, really, that's interference on Crosby there. That's pretty blatant interference missed by the officials. The one thing that if you miss a call, so be it. Missed calls happen all the time. We all watch all sports. Missed calls happen all the time. I feel like the only sport where it doesn't happen is tennis, and that's because they use robots.
Yeah.
But that's not the discussion we're having here. Calls get missed. I think the only holdup that everyone should be upset about, and because I'm never on for, blaming officiating, blaming your loss on one missed call. How about an explanation? How about a simple, hey, let me just go skate over to the captain or skate over to the head coach and tell them why we're not calling it or what they were looking at, which was clearly just looking for offsides. It's clearly all they were looking for. Not getting the explanation is the biggest reason why most people have so many issues with the NHL officiating.
Mm-hmm.
And if you really want to throw them in there, even though it's a different conversation, player safety. But again, different conversation. The league just doesn't give explanations. And we talked about it a couple weeks ago that I think it's the NBA or the NFL makes officials available at certain times. This would have been a good time to have whoever those officials were just made available for 5 minutes of questioning. Just, hey, what'd you see? Can we show you what it looked like? Why not? What went through? What happened? And just go from there. What's the harm in that? And also just that's a huge reason why this league is not, really well liked by its fans. Is that these officials are A, missing calls, which again, calls will get missed, but also B, not given explanation nor being held accountable.
Yeah.
It took a ref getting caught on a hot mic to really put more stuff into light, and it's still not changing. So that's the piece on it. Regardless, at the end of the day, how about this? Tristan Jarry's going to make that save, but also an explanation would be nice.
Yeah, I'll do you one better. Not just does Tristan Jarry need to make that save, Erik Karlsson needs to switch and pick up that player, or at least divert Filip Forsberg. Don't give him a direct line to the front of the net, because I don't think, even if Crosby wasn't interfered with by Ryan O'Reilly, I don't think he would have caught Filip Forsberg. I don't think he would have seriously been able to make a play on Filip Forsberg. Maybe he would have been able to be on his back a little bit more pressure. He wouldn't have been in as home free, but I still think Forsberg would have gotten a breakaway. I still think Forsberg probably would have ended the game at 14 seconds into the third, or into the overtime, excuse me. But, we digress. The Penguins move on. They look to try to get 2 points against the Tampa Bay Lightning later tonight. They do get a standings point against the Nashville Predators in that, and I think Tristan Jarry does deserve some credit for that because he was stellar once again in the third period for the second straight game, making some timely saves there. And then, of course, we saw what happened in overtime. We talked about what happened in overtime. But a goal that came earlier in that performance came from Evgeni Malkin. And I thought it was a very important goal for Malkin and for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Smith to Malkin, the first time we've seen that in probably close to a month, to be completely honest. At least that connection and the way that they were able to capitalize and beat UC Soros. That finally ends his drought. He had been scoreless in 5 of the previous 6 games. The one goal that he did have in that stretch was the empty netter that ended Sidney Crosby's point streak at that point. So it's nice to see him and Smith connect on a goal, but I still don't think he had the best performance against Nashville. Even with the goal, he struggled throughout most of that game, and not just talking about that one shift where he got absolutely pummeled and it led to the John Ludwig fight. He was the only Penguins line, the second line of Malkin, Smith, and Drew O'Connor, that had under 50% of the shot attempts against Nashville. They were outchanced 6-3 at 5-on-5, and Malkin himself credited with 3 giveaways on the night. I think the Penguins at the end of the day look at Evgeni Malkin. I think Evgeni Malkin looks in the mirror and knows that he's not giving his best performance right now, that the Penguins need more from him, and he needs more from himself.
He does. We all do need that. Everyone needs more of Evgeni Malkin, especially better Evgeni Malkin. He knows he can be better. He has said he can be better. And he's taken things very seriously to still be the dominant force he was 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even earlier this season. He's taken those proper steps to get there. I keep saying that the chemistry between him and Riley Smith it's definitely still there.
Yeah.
Like, that has not faded one bit. It's just the finishing ability has kind of gone kaput. And, you're right. One goal doesn't make everything better. It might open the floodgates a little bit. We don't know. We're about to see the second game after this. I mean, it's really what helped Riley Smith arrive in Pittsburgh. He scored that first goal, and then the avalanche happened. We saw him score a couple more, really form that great chemistry with Malkin. It all kind of showed up for him finally. Maybe Malkin has that same situation, but I think for right now, he knows he needs to be better. Everyone knows he needs to be better. Mike Sullivan will continue speaking highly of him, as you're supposed to do with a future Hall of Famer near the end of his career. Perfectly fine. You're supposed to speak highly of him. You know he's going to take it seriously. Everyone on this team, it seems, is a veteran presence that knows what it takes to win and has the ability to still do it. We know Malkin does. I mean, 19 points in 21 games. You would have told us 5 years ago. I mean, 5 years ago, Malkin was not in a great place. Injuries piling up, points not coming. But if you would have told us 5 years ago, let's go 6, 7, 8 years ago, that a 37-year-old Evgeni Malkin had 19 points in 21 games, we'd be taking it. Because you never know what you're going to get out of a 37-year-old. Mm-hmm. But there's something different about this, where that long, lengthy, pointless drought, scoreless drought, all of it piles up, and he's lucky to still be at 19 points through 21 games, just a little bit under a point per game.
Yeah, you look at what the point production has dipped to. In the first 10 games of the season, Evgeni Malkin had 13 points, 7 goals, and 6 assists, including 5 points on the power play. In his last 11 games since then, so about a 50-50 split on the season so far, 6 points, 3 goals, 3 assists. Like I mentioned, one of those being the empty netter against the Vegas Golden Knights. And his shots have dropped too. First 10 games, he had 32 shots on goal. Last 11, he has only 21, and his power play production has dropped off the face of the earth, as has the rest of the Pittsburgh Penguins. He went from 5 points on the power play in the opening 10 games to only 1 point, and that being an assist on the power play in the last 11. Now, you look at Evgeni Malkin, for better or for worse, he is what many consider to be the heartbeat of that unit. He's the guy that takes most of the one-timers. He's the guy that carries the puck second most behind Erik Karlsson. He's also the guy that turns the puck over the most on the power play. So a lot of the power play issues can be attributed to Evgeni Malkin, but I think that as a whole, if his game improves and steps up, that's going to go a long way in getting the Pittsburgh Penguins to score a lot more, because right now goal scoring is the issue. It's not the defense. It's not the goaltending over the past couple of weeks. It's been the goal scoring, and a big part of that is Evgeni Malkin.
Yeah, and even without the goal scoring, you talk about the power play, and I'll keep harping on the keep harping on having Letang and Carlson share a blue line on there.
Yeah.
And this is one thing that I've noticed. This is a small, minute detail, and I'm sure it's just coincidence. But whenever an opposing penalty kill gets the puck, it almost always seems like they're getting it out past Malkin on the blue line. They're not throwing it toward Carlson. They're always throwing it toward Malkin because either A, let's be real, he's Evgeni Malkin. Sometimes that effort is not there to keep it in. It's just not. B, he's not as good with he's definitely just not as good with keeping pucks in on a blue line. He's never really practiced it, so he's not really trained to get a body in front of it. Doesn't have that kind of hand-eye coordination to sort of, bat it out of the air and keep it in. That's something that Chris Letang, on the other hand, though, excelled at. There's one thing I've really noticed in these power plays from last year to this year. Without Chris Letang on that top unit, on that blue line, pucks are flying out a lot more often.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not saying take Malkin off the top unit. You might have to in the situation if you want to keep everything else the same. But for the sake of keeping those pucks in the zone and maybe salvaging an extra opportunity, you need someone like another defenseman out there who can just knock those pucks out of the air, knock those clearing attempts. Like you said, some of them, there's nothing you can do about it. No one's getting them, right? But there are certain ones, because it's Malkin, it's always sort of, a half of an attempt sort of given to kind of reach a stick out or not really throw your body in front. Like, it's the little things. I implore you to try and take a look at that next game. Just because it seems to always be toward Malkin. Maybe it's happenstance, but I mean, if I'm an opposing penalty kill, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, the scouting report says send it out past Malkin first, try to send it out past a guy like Erik Karlsson, who is, again, phenomenal at trying to keep the puck in. But I don't want it to sound like we're harping on just Malkin, because that second line as a whole, let's look at it from a whole standpoint, because it's not all on him. I mean, he was carrying an ice-cold Rickard Rakell through the opening month of the season, and Mike Sullivan was not giving him any chance to breathe with that. Rakell was staple gun to that top line, that second line, the entire season, with no changes being made. And even with the injury, who got the better of the line mates? It was Sidney Crosby. It was, let's give Alex Nylander to Evgeni Malkin, somebody who has not succeeded at the NHL level in multiple years. And then also, you see Brian Rust come back, and we talked about it on Tuesday. We said, okay, maybe put Brian Rust with Evgeni Malkin because O'Connor's been working well. And yes, I do think O'Connor at this point, I'm excited to see what he's able to do as time goes forward, because I think O'Connor has put together a pretty good season no matter what line he's played on. So I'm excited to see what he and his capabilities and his forechecking and his aggressiveness is going to do for Malkin, what it's going to open up, because that's what O'Connor does, is he opens up the ice because of the way that he plays the game. So I'm excited about that. But it's not all on Evgeni Malkin, and it's not all on him scoring either. I think that's the biggest thing, is people are going to listen to this and say, oh, you want him to go back to scoring over a point per game. And yes, that would be nice. But what I'm looking for is just a minimalization of bad turnovers, right? This guy is a Hall of Famer. This guy is one of the greatest Pittsburgh Penguins of all time. And he feels the need to carry the load on his shoulders, which that's great. I mean, you want to put a lot of pressure on yourself. That's what makes diamonds, and that's what's made Evgeni Malkin great in his career, particularly when Sidney Crosby has been injured. But he's on pace for his second straight season with 100 giveaways. That's not good. That is not good. He has 26 on the season. 8 of the 26 are on the power play. You want to talk about one of the reasons the power play is struggling? That's one of them right there. They give the puck away way too easily. There was a play in the last game where Malkin rimmed it around. It came to Crosby, and Crosby rimmed it right back around, and somebody in Nashville picked up on that. And they picked up the play, and it was an easy out. You need to make smarter plays on the power play in particularly, but in general, I think Evgeni Malkin really needs to limit the turnovers. Like I mentioned, he was credited with 3 against Nashville, and it was evident when you watched the game too that a lot of the time the puck was on the stick of Evgeni Malkin in his own zone. He turned the puck over.
Yeah, it's part of the huge letdown of what Malkin's been bringing in. And it's not that it's a letdown. I mean, he had a great season last year. I didn't even realize he had 100 turnovers last year.
105 last year.
What was that?
105 last year. Sorry.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, I didn't realize that's what the number was. Regardless, it's not ideal, especially for someone you have out on the ice so much in so many different situations. It's part of the game for him, which is something that just needs to be minimized. Finding those points is huge, but also maintaining that possession is even bigger sometimes, especially if you can play with a line that can help you produce too. Like we said, we saw the chemistry and we still see the chemistry with Riley Smith, and Riley Smith can produce in his own right. You got to give him someone else though. I mean, Raquel wasn't technically, I guess, still is ice cold on the year, no goals. Nylander, we know, can't finish. I just looked at, he's played 12 games with this team, 3 points.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what we expected whenever we saw 50 points in the AHL last year.
Yeah.
And as good as Drew O'Connor is, that I don't think he's ever played with him. So they have to build something still. That's something that needs to be sparked before that can really work out. And for what it's worth, Drew O'Connor in these 21 games, 5 points. I mean, he plays the position well. He does his job properly. But again, that feels like an Alex Nylander thing. Can he finish? Actually, I mean,
yeah, I think O'Connor brings more, but yes,
yeah, definitely brings more. He brings more of the tenacity, he's going to utilize his speed, and he's going to utilize his drive for the puck and maybe drive to the net a little more, but he's not going to bring in a boatload of goals. He's just not. I think that finishing ability isn't there until it is, and he's kind of always been a depth forward in my eyes, but if he's able to play that role on the first line of Crosby, it's a little different, the Dom Simone effect. But with Malkin, you could never put Dom Simone with Malkin.
No.
That's just not the way it would work. So this goes for O'Connor. That's the kind of thing that just wouldn't work. And it's up to Malkin himself. He knows he's good. We all know he's good. Coaching staff knows he's good. Organization knows he's good. Everyone knows he's good. Yeah. ESPN and the league really don't. But
anybody making a list does know he's good, but everybody else is aware of it.
Everyone else is aware of how good he is, and it's just now up to him to refine that rhythm. Maybe certain changes need to be made, but I think we're all also confident he'll get there. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah. There's ebbs and flows in the National Hockey League season, and a player that's 37 years old that started as hot as Evgeni Malkin did, you don't expect him to carry that throughout the entire 82. You're just hoping that, whenever he has these lulls, they don't continue. And right now it's continued a little too long, and it's affecting other parts of his game, not just his goal scoring. Like we mentioned, in the defensive zone, he had been very good early in the season. He had been very responsible early in the season. And with the lack of scoring comes a lack of patience, and that patience is turned into turnovers. And that's something the Penguins just cannot afford, specifically when the rest of their team is not, capitalizing on their opportunities on the man advantage and the opportunities that they have at 5-on-5 as well. But let's talk a little bit about the bottom six. We talked about the second line a little bit. Let's move over to the bottom six, and we'll do that right after the break. Welcome back to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. I don't want to say the bottom six is broken for the Pittsburgh Penguins. I just think that there still needs to be some advancement that's made to that unit. Now, when you look at that unit as a whole, a quick breakdown, I think Lars Eller, in my opinion, Lars Eller and Nola Chari have settled into their roles nicely. I've liked the way that they've played over the past couple of weeks. I think that they've settled in and they've gotten their roles, and they're playing their roles to a T at this point. I really like what I've seen from those two. I think Zohorna is starting to fade, like we mentioned he typically does. After a couple of games, after a little bit of stretch of really good play, he starts to fade into the back. The circumstances around him have changed. He's moved from the right to the left side. O'Connor's no longer on that line, and Harkins just isn't getting it done. Speaking of Harkins, I think he's a liability on the ice. I really do. I know we've only seen him for 6 games at this level, but the Pittsburgh Penguins can't afford to have him as a third line winger, maybe as a fourth liner in a limited role, but Jeff Carter's already taken that role up. So is Matt Nieto. You can't afford to have another guy, playing that role, especially on a third line that you're counting on to help with some offense there. I think he's a liability. He's probably going to be in the lineup again because they sent Alex Nylander back. I'm not sure Vinny Hinostroza is that much of an upgrade over Jansen Harkins. I do think that he brings a little bit more stability, a little bit more sensibility to the lineup. I think he's a little bit more comfortable at the NHL level. But again, I think that's a big area of improvement for the Pittsburgh Penguins and that they need to look at. And then, like I mentioned, Nieto and Carter, they're contributing, but very little. Matt Nieto at least is a really good penalty killer. I'll give him that. Jeff Carter is contributing more than he did at the beginning of the season, but that bar was set very low to begin with. So, the fact that the Penguins now have somebody in the lineup that is more of a liability than Jeff Carter, that tells you something about the bottom six. It hasn't been horrible, but there do need to be some improvements made.
Absolutely. Those centers have settled in nicely. I'll still bang the drum that Lars Eller's a fourth line center guy. Noel Acciari can maybe Noel Acciari still holds 4C. Lars Eller moves to a wing, but again, that's in a perfect situation.
I'd switch that. I put Acciari on the wing. I think he'd probably perform better. But to your point, one of those two on the fourth line together, because there's better players above them, would be best case scenario.
Yes, and I also kind of just threw Acciari to kept Acciari center because I don't know how net front duties work in terms of center wing, but I guess Patrick Hornquist was the net front guy forever, right? Yeah. So. Yeah, I think those two being on the fourth line is the ideal situation. But again, we're not in the ideal situation because those two sharing a fourth line also means maybe Matt Nieto's not here anymore for some reason. Obviously that's a completely new third line almost. I wouldn't expect Zahorna to survive that sort of thing. Maybe Drew O'Connor's there, but he's in the top six right now. This bottom six it's a weird situation where it's definitely improved. I think we can all agree that it's definitely better than what it was last year. But we knew going into the year it was going to be better defensively. The scoring is starting to find a little touch. It's coming from the weird spots of Noel Acciari. But Lars Ellers, we knew we were expecting something. It's still not great though. How about that? That's what it is. It's better for sure than it was last year because that was not good in any way, shape, or form last year. But this time around, it is at least better, but still has so much room for improvement.
Yeah, and when you look at what happened earlier in the season, one change made all the difference. 4 games into the season, the bottom 6 looked putrid, and the one change was they brought up Radim Zahorna. Now, Zahorna has faded a little bit. Whether or not he can swing back up, that's a different question. We haven't seen him get that much of an extended look at the NHL level, really, in his entire career. So is he able to bounce back? Is he able to continue with the ebbs and flows of the season? We've said that a lot on this episode. That's something that is yet to be determined. But that was the change earlier in the season. What could that change even be at this point? I mean, you could switch out Harkins for Hinostroza to start because, like I said, I don't think Jansen Harkins, at least at this present time, is going to get the job done at this point, especially in a third line role. Do I think Hinostroza is, picture perfect for a third line role either? No, but I do think that he would be at least a step up over what Jansen Harkins has brought over the past, over the 6 games he's played this season, and particularly what he brought on Tuesday against the Preds.
So here's the real fun thing about Radim Zahorna. If/when he files into the lineup tonight against Tampa Bay, that'll be a career high in the games played in a single season at 18. Whenever he played 17 and 21-22, he also had only 6 points. So he's on his pace. He is on his pace of 17 games, 6 points. He's got the extra goal this time around. He's a 3-3 rather than a 2-4. But the other aspects of his games that he's shooting the puck a hell of a lot more. He has 28 shots on goal this year, where in those 17 games before, he only had 9. So the stats are weird. He was a +12 that year, by the way. Wild. He only had 6 points. But hey, just a +1 right now. Again, so that stat doesn't mean too much. But you can tell he's carrying a bit more confidence. He's obviously getting more time on ice, but as he is about to enter his career high in games played in a single season, this is really where now it becomes totally unknown. What can he actually be with a little more consistency? And that's so far, like I mentioned, he's on his pace. 6 points in 17 games. That's what he is as a player, it seems. He's 27, so there's no more real room for growth almost. We'll see if this is the sort of thing that persists. Again, in a perfect lineup and in a perfect world for this team, he's not in it, really. He was a huge help when he came in.
Yeah.
But it almost seems as if there are other names around the league and around, not necessarily on the team right now, that would take him over on a consistent basis. But if you make the certain changes, you assume certain slides happen, he eventually falls out. That being said, we'll just see what we get. I'm just not sure what it'll be yet. We'll find out. And as for Harkins, just jumping back to that, you're right, liability.
Yeah. With Zahorna, because I think we both agree on Harkins, we don't need to waste any more breath or time on that. With Zahorna too, he's 6'6". I wish he would just play like it a little bit.
Yeah,
like
right.
play a little bit more physical, my guy. I mean, that's the thing. It's not his game. He's 27 years old. He's not going to grow that physicality or that want for physicality anytime soon. But you just, he does battle. He does use his stick very well. He's great when it comes to the forecheck and the back check with using his extension and using his, his long wingspan and ability to disrupt passing lanes. But, I just wish he would use that 6'6" frame a little bit more because, he's technically in a grinder role, right? Like he's in a third line, fourth line grinder role, and he just doesn't have a lot of that sandpaper to him. So, I don't think that I'd go as far as to say like in an ideal situation, he's not in the lineup. I do think that he's an NHL caliber player, but I think the consistency, which is what makes a lot of NHL players from, decent to good, I think he's missing that in his game. And that's something that, maybe with time this year, like you mentioned, it's going to be his career high games played in a season when he suits up later tonight, because there's no way he's coming out of the lineup. But, maybe that's what it is. It's like he's just never played at this level for this long, and he just needs to find that consistency, and he gets that through playing through it. He's going to get the opportunity because, looking at the AHL right now, I don't know if there's very many other options right now that come up and really vastly improve this bottom six. Rem of the house, Pitlick, I think he's had a pretty good season down there, but a lot of his points are on the power play. And that's a little concerning when he's not going to play. He might get on the second power play unit, but we talked about it on Tuesday. We don't care about the second power play unit. We don't want that unit to have to be, leaned upon. We want the first unit to be able to score goals in the first minute, or at least be able to create enough, energy in the first couple of minutes that the second power play unit is rendered almost useless. So, Rem Pitlick may be an option, at least offensively. They didn't like him in the preseason when it came to his all-around style of play, so they're hoping that he picks that up in the AHL. We don't know. Jonathan Gruden is a guy that is unproven at the NHL level. He has pretty decent numbers at the AHL. He also has a lot of penalty minutes. Is that something, is that a Pandora's box that you want to open at the NHL level? I think not. So I went digging because this year there's an abnormal amount of veterans on the free agent market as the season started. And I'm not going to say Phil Kessel. I went out and found a name, and I want to get your opinion. I want to get the listeners' opinion. So let us know on YouTube. I just recently found out because I signed up for Spotify for podcasters, which I didn't know I had access to. You can leave an answer or a comment on Spotify, and we can go back and look through it. So if you listen there, thank you. 116 of you have us as your number one podcast, which is pretty cool. I meant to say that off the top. So thank you if you have us as your number one podcast on Spotify. But I want your reaction to this. Listener, Horwat, everybody that's tuned in and listening to my voice right now. What do you think about Josh Bailey?
I knew you were going to say Josh Bailey.
Really?
Whenever you told me before the show started, because you didn't say the name, I forgot he was a free agent, kind of forgot the name. Mm-hmm. And then as you started talking about it more, I went, wait, Josh Bailey's still available.
Yeah.
That's a name that I even glanced at prior to the season starting. Mm-hmm. Because he brings that New York Islanders mentality that genuinely the Penguins need in their depth, which is they're going to shut you down. There's zero doubt they're going to shut you down. Mm-hmm. Shut offenses down every way to Monday. But then also, especially Josh Bailey, he's going to sneak a few. He's going to sneak, especially against rival teams.
Yeah.
Especially against teams within the division.
He'll be great in practice.
Be phenomenal on scoring on the Penguins. So it'll piss everyone off.
Yeah.
That's one I would have to dig deeper into. Tell you what, I don't hate the idea. Don't hate the idea. How old is he again?
He's 33 years old right now.
Hey, you know what?
It would be a 1-year
33-year-old Erik Karlsson. So it's not like he'd be the oldest one on the team.
No, not by a large margin. And you're already the oldest team in the NHL by average. So what's another 30-plus-year-old? But I do think, you look at him, he didn't resign with the Isles after the season. He did go to Ottawa on a PTO, was released before the season started. Doesn't seem like a team that he would fit in with anyway. That's a team that likes to play a heavy speed game. The Penguins are playing more and more like the New York Islanders this season. So maybe a guy in Josh Bailey who's played in a bottom six role on a team like that values defensive hockey like the Penguins do in their bottom six, like they've tried to value as the season has gone on, especially, just trying to win these games 2-1, 3-2. That's what the Penguins have been playing this season. And maybe a player like, Josh Bailey, who has scored 60 goals, 203 points in 342 games over the past 5 seasons. Not only that, he plays center, plays left wing, he plays right wing. He has that versatility that Mike Sullivan loves. He can play the penalty kill, which is huge. The Penguins loved having a stockpile of penalty killing forwards. Josh Bailey would add to that. And he's a second power play guy. Maybe you bump a guy like Jeff Carter off the second power play. You add a guy like Josh Bailey, who, he doesn't fill the back of the net 20, 25 times, but more often than not, he scored more than 10 goals a season in his NHL career. He had 8 last season in 64 games. So I think that if you're looking on that market, I don't know how long Rickard Rakell is going to be out, but I doubt it that Josh Bailey is going to cost too much money for a 1-year deal to come in here for half of a season or 3/4 of a season. You could probably get him for somewhere around $1 million, which will make it easier to fit him under the NHL salary cap, even when a guy like Rickard Rakell comes back. You would just have to send back like a Jansen Harkins to probably make up most of that salary.
Yeah, you would. Sorry, I was looking at Cap Friendly, trying to get some details on things. But when it comes to Josh Bailey, I mean, there's no. I mean, if we're learning anything, Patrick Kane just signed a deal for about $2 million, a little over $2 million for a year.
2.75, yeah, in Detroit.
Almost. Okay, so almost 3. Josh Bailey's not going to cost Patrick Kane money, even if this is a very real weird situation with Patrick Kane, where I don't think he's going to last. But that's, again, not what we're talking about. But the comparison of the deal, at least, is Josh Bailey wouldn't cost that much, and that's an affordable deal. Under $3 million for Patrick Kane is an extremely affordable deal, even at his state. Josh Bailey could come in at $1 million, a little over maybe, just because he's got some pedigree to him. This cap-friendly, or not cap-friendly, his hockey reference says, that's what I was trying to find, like his salary from last year. That his current cap hit, again, probably just from last season, 2.6666 repeated. It's not going to be that, but
no,
even that, like, let's say all things neutral, that's still a decent number, all things considered. So if Kyle Dubas is willing to make that sort of jump, if he's willing to make that sort of change to the lineup, that's a real fun option.
Yeah, I think it's a lot. I think it's a good option for the Pittsburgh Penguins if they're trying to look outside the organization to help supplement this bottom six, because like we mentioned, Eller has performed well. This is really a similar situation to Lars Eller. Somebody who is aging but still plays a pretty good style, strong on the defensive side of the puck, and can contribute on the offensive side. I mean, it fits the mold that Kyle Dubas has looked for in his bottom six, particularly on his third line. And imagine a third line of O'Connor, Lars Eller, and Josh Bailey. I think that is a upgrade over what you've seen, and that does allow you to do like you said, Horwat, bump Redeems a Hornet down. Maybe that bumps Jeff Carter out of the lineup. Maybe that just bumps the Hornet out of the lineup all entirely. I mean, when healthy, of course, because Rickard Rakell would be the guy that would go in the top 6 to bring Drew O'Connor down. But I think this would be a good move for the Pittsburgh Penguins, in my opinion. Like I said, let me know in the comments what you think about the Penguins potentially adding Josh Bailey. I know there's going to be a lot of people that are just going to simply look at his age and deny it, but I implore you, you mentioned the word earlier, I wanted to use it. I implore you to look beyond the age and look at the player behind it, because I think he could be of value to the Pittsburgh Penguins. And hey, Pens play the Isles twice in December. So maybe you get a little scouting report there, and maybe he turns the tables on the New York Islanders in the matchup with the Pittsburgh Penguins. But like we mentioned, they play the Islanders twice in December. We're going to have a December preview for you right after this break. Welcome back to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. mentioned we're going to have a December preview. We also mentioned at the beginning of November how much things can change month to month. In October, the Pittsburgh Penguins went 3-6-0, and they were in dead last in the Eastern Conference at the end of that one. They are currently 7-4-1 with tonight's game withstanding in the month of November. So certainly a better month. They've performed better in general, even some of their losses. But December is a pivotal month in the NHL calendar. You know, we can say it every single time. You can say, oh, this is a pivotal stretch. This is an important stretch. But you look at December, it's always a month that creates separation. If you look at the Eastern Conference standings, and we talked about this before we came on and recorded, the top 8 teams in the wild card race are separated by 4 points. Yes, the Pittsburgh Penguins sit in 8th place in that wild card race right now. But you look at the schedule that's coming up for them. It is a great opportunity to climb that ladder, a ladder that the rungs are not so far away, right? 4 points is 2 wins. And when you're playing these teams head to head, it's a great opportunity to move up and get yourself in a better position. We mentioned they play the Tampa Bay Lightning tonight. They have a home and home with the Philadelphia Flyers coming up over this weekend. Then they have the Tampa Bay Lightning again next week. And then you look at who they play next month. The Islanders twice, who are in that mix. The Panthers, the Montreal Canadiens, the Ottawa Senators, the Toronto Maple Leafs. All of these teams are in that mix. And when you get that many games against teams that are all in the mix, it's a really good opportunity for you to position yourself really well by the time New Year's rolls around.
It is. It's a great jumping off point for this. And if you want to make things even, not want to say easier, but even closer and more attainable for the Penguins, is take that wild card ranking out of this conversation, considering they're both Atlantic teams right now. The Penguins are 3 points. That's a game and a half. That's a win and an overtime loss back from the Washington Capitals in 3rd in the division. They could jump
2 games in hand, though.
Still, I mean, I'm looking at pure points. You know, it's still early in the season. I don't got to worry about wins percentage or games in hand quite yet. But just looking at the pure points of it, Penguins have 21 with their 10-10-1. Washington Capitals 11-6-2, 24. That's attainable. That's 3 points up there. Like I said, that's a win and an overtime loss that you could easily jump into. Obviously, you said 2 games in hand, yes, but we're not worried about that at the moment. It is still November for the time being. You could jump into the Capitals position, 3rd in the division, pretty quickly, just with how tight it all is. And because it is still so early, I asked Ryan Graves about this. They're not looking around the division, really. They're still just trying to focus on their own game, let everything else sort itself out. If they are able to stack those wins the way they want to, they can then kind of open the page and say, all right, where are we? Oh, look, we're in a pretty good position, despite maybe the record still being sort of mediocre. That's a good spot to be in, where if they just focus on their own game, play their way, let other teams handle themselves, let other teams handle the situations in front of them, then maybe the Penguins just kind of sneak into a good spot out of nowhere if everyone's able to keep to themselves for the moment. But that will be hard to do with so many Eastern Conference games coming up. Regardless, those are big, though. Those are where you really do have to focus on yourself, collect your wins, and then, oh, hey, we did all of the winning we needed to do. Now we're sitting in a playoff spot, and a very good one at that, because I said the Capitals are only 3 points up. 2 more ahead of them, 1 more win, 2nd place in the Metro, the Carolina Hurricanes. The Rangers are a bit of a different atmosphere right now.
Yeah, the Rangers and the Boston Bruins are a couple steps ahead of everybody else in the Eastern Conference right now, which I'm not going to take a victory lap just yet, but, I saw the Boston Bruins having a pretty good season. A lot of people called me crazy, but, every once in a while I know some puck. But, no, you talk about the importance of these Eastern Conference games, and you're 100% correct. We remember what happened last year. They were chasing the entire season. They're chasing right now. It'd be nice to be in a spot and be the one getting chased for the Pittsburgh Penguins once the calendar flips into 2024. That's a massive thing. It's hard to come from outside the picture and beat teams to get above and climb past teams. It's easier to get above teams and defend teams off. I know it's not much of a difference. At the end of the day, you're just playing the next team in front of you time after time after time. But it means a lot morale-wise, in my opinion, when you look at the NHL. It means a lot morale-wise when you're fending teams off versus trying to fight and claw past them. So you look at December, 13 games in the month, 26 standings points up for grabs. We'll close it out with this, Horwat. How many points do you imagine the Penguins need to position themselves in a good spot at New Year, wherever that may be. In my opinion, I'd like to see them in a playoff spot by the time the ball drops in New York on December 31st.
With 26 points up for grabs, bare minimum, you're going to need more than 13. I think that's obvious. I would even push closer to saying you need close to 18, 19, 20, especially to be in a real good spot. Because again, yeah, we're chasing. The Penguins are chasing. We're in the rear view, though. It's right there. It's not like the Penguins are, a couple cars behind.
Yeah,
they're sort of right there in this traffic jam.
Yeah, I was gonna say images may be closer than they appear.
Yeah, exactly. The words on your rearview mirror that you don't always read are more true than ever here. The Penguins are right there. It's a big traffic jam, and don't get me wrong, that even the teams kind of behind them. We didn't bring up the Blue Jackets and Senators. They're kind of right there too. The entire East is still a bit up for grabs. I mean, the Senators had genuine playoff aspirations. I mean, they're a handful of points behind at this point, but can still find those legs and make it jump. There's going to be some good teams missing the playoffs yet again. And the Penguins, I don't think it'd be one of them. They're going to need I'll stick with, say, 18, bare minimum for the month of December.
18 is the number I had because I looked through the schedule and I said, you know what? 9-4 would be where I think they need to be.
Yeah.
And that gives them the 18 standings points. And I think that is an attainable goal when you look at the schedule. It's a lot of teams that are in the same position the Penguins are in. So it's not like they are going up against any Goliaths. Not that they haven't, performed well against them, i.e. Vegas win, Colorado win, the LA Kings win. So they've performed well against some of the best teams in the league. They just need to find some consistency, and they need to string together a couple winning streaks. I mean, we saw what they've done this month. They're 7-4-1, but that's on the back of a 5-game win streak to start the month in general. So you need to stack a couple win streaks. You need to make sure that you avoid those losing streaks of 2, 3, 4 games. And you got to just continue to bounce back whenever you have a down game. And the Pittsburgh Penguins, they've struggled with that this season. I mean, they have the 1 win streak of 5 games, but on each side of that is a 3-6 October. And now you look at what they've done over the past couple of weeks. They're 2-4-1 in their last 7 games. So you need to get some more winning going if you're the Pittsburgh Penguins. But that's going to do it for this episode of The Tip of the Iceberg. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We will be back next week with The Tip of the Iceberg, but make sure you tune into the Iceberg recap, usually the day after a game, and also Ice-Burgh To Go, which comes out usually Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, as long as I have something to talk about and have the time to do it, because sometimes you just, around this time of year, work seems to pile up a little bit faster as everybody tries to get everything done before the holidays. But that's it for this one. We'll see you guys next time.